Hi everybody, it is time for chapter 4 of To Kill a Mockingbird. You might recall that in the last chapter, Scout went to school. She had a horrible morning. She got in trouble with the teacher. She tried to help out where when she thought the teacher didn't know about different things, she tried to help out. We met Burris Ewell, and we heard about the Ewell family. Walter Cunningham came for lunch, and she got in trouble there because she made fun of him because he was putting syrup on everything. So there was that, and at the end of the day, she talked to her dad because she wasn't supposed to be able to read anymore. She was very upset about this, and they worked out a plan where they would still read at home. She just wouldn't tell her teacher. So there you go. It's fall. Dill is not around, and they still run past the Radley house to get to school because it's very scary. He eats squirrels. He eats live animals. He scratches on screens. You never know what he's going to do. Okay, so I am on page 43. Ready? The remainder of my school days were no more auspicious than the first. Indeed, they were an endless project that slowly evolved into a unit in which miles of construction paper and wax crayon were expended by the state of Alabama in its well-meaning but fruitless efforts to teach me group dynamics. What Jem called the Dewey Decimal System was school-wide by the end of my first year, so I had no chance to compare it with other teaching techniques. I could only look around me. Atticus and my uncle, who went to school at home, knew everything. At least, what one didn't know, the other did. Furthermore, I couldn't help but notice that my father had served for years in the state legislature, elected each time without opposition, innocent of the adjustments my teachers thought essential to the development of good citizenship. Jem, educated on a half-decimal, half-dunce cap basis, seemed to function effectively alone or in a group. But Jem was a poor example. No tutorial system devised by man could have stopped him from getting at books. As for me, I knew nothing except what I gathered from Time magazine and reading everything I could lay my hands on at home. But as I inched sluggishly along the treadmill of the Maycomb County school system, I could not help receiving the impression that I was being cheated out of something. Out of what, I knew not. Yet I did not believe that 12 years of unrelieved boredom was exactly what the state had in mind for me. As the year passed, released from school 30 minutes before Jem, who had to stay until 3 o'clock, I ran by the Radley place as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached the safety of our front porch. One afternoon, as I raced by, something caught my eye, and caught it in such a way that I took a deep breath, a long look around, and I went back. 2 live oaks stood at the edge of the Radley lot. Their roots reached out into the side road and made it bumpy. Something about one of the trees attracted my attention. Some tin foil was sticking in a knothole just above my eye level, winking at me in the afternoon sun. I stood on tiptoe, hastily looked around once more, reached into the hole, and withdrew 2 pieces of chewing gum, minus their outer wrapper. Now, my first impulse was to get it in my mouth as quickly as possible, but I remembered where I was. I ran home, and on our front porch, I examined my loot. The gum looked fresh. I sniffed it, and it smelled all right. I licked it, and I waited for a while. And when I did not die, I crammed it into my mouth. Wrigley's Double Mint. When Jem came home, he asked me where I got such a wad. I told him I found it. Don't eat things you find, Scout. Well, this wasn't on the ground. It was in a tree. Jem growled. Well, it was, I said. It was sticking in that tree yonder, the one coming from school. Spit it out right now. I spat it out. The tang was fading anyway. I've been chewing it all afternoon, and I ain't dead yet, not even sick. Jem stamped his foot. Don't you know that you're not supposed to even touch the trees over there? You'll get killed if you do. Well, you touched the house once. It was different. Now you go gargle right now. You hear me? Ain't neither. It'll take the taste out of my mouth. You don't, and I'll tell Calpurnia on you. Rather than risk a tangle with Calpurnia, I did as Jim told me. For some reason, my first year of school had wrought a great change in our relationship. Calpurnia's tyranny and unfairness and meddling in my business had faded to gentle grumblings of general disapproval. On my part, I went to too much trouble, sometimes not to provoke her. Summer was on the way. Jem and I waited it with impatience. Summer was our best season. It was sleeping on the back screen porch in cots or trying to sleep in the tree house. Summer was everything good to eat. It was 1,000 colors and a parched landscape, but most of all, summer was Dill. The authorities released us early the last day of school, and Jem and I walked home together. "Reckon old Dill'll come home tomorrow," I said. "Probably day after," said Jem. "Mississippi turns him loose a day later." When we came to the live oaks at the Radley place, I raised my finger to point, for the 100th time, to the knothole where I'd found the chewing gum, trying to make Jem believe that I found it there, and I found myself pointing to another piece of tinfoil. "I see it, Scout, I see it." Jem looked around. He reached up and gingerly pocketed a tiny silver shiny package. We ran home, and on the front porch we looked at a small box patchwork with bits of tinfoil collected from chewing gum wrappers. It was the kind of box wedding rings came in, purple velvet with a minute catch. Jem flicked open the tiny catch, and inside were 2 scrubbed and polished pennies, one on top of the other. Jem examined them. "Indian heads," he said. 1906 and Scout, one of them's 1900. These are real old." 1900, I echoed. "Say, hush a minute, I'm thinking. Jem, you reckon that's somebody's hiding place?" "No, don't nobody much pass by there, unless it's some grown person's. Well, grown folks don't have hiding places. You reckon we ought to keep 'em, Jem?" "Well, I don't know what we could do, Scout. Who'd we give 'em back to? I know for a fact that don't nobody go by there. Cecil goes by the back street all the way around town to get home." Cecil Jacobs, who lived at the far end of our street next door to the post office, walked a total of 1 mile per school day to avoid the Radley place and old Mrs. Henry Lafayette Du Bois. Mrs. Du Bois lived 2 doors up the street from us. Neighborhood opinion was unanimous that Mrs. Du Bois was the meanest old lady who ever lived. Jem wouldn't go by her place without Atticus beside him. "Well, what you reckon we ought to do, Jem?" "Finders for keepers, unless title was proven. Plucking an occasional chamomile, getting a squirt of hot milk from Miss Maudie Atkins's cow on a summer day, helping ourselves to someone's scuppernugs was part of our ethical culture, but money was different." "Tell you what," said Jem, "we'll keep 'em till school starts, and then go around and ask everybody if they're theirs. There's some bus kids, maybe. He was too taken up with getting out of school today and forgot 'em. These are somebody's. I know that. See how they've been slicked up? They've been saved." "Yeah, but why should somebody want to put away chewing gum like that? You know it don't last. "I don't know, Scout. But these are important to somebody." "How's that, Jem?" "Well, Indian heads. Well, they come from the Indians. They're real strong magic. They make you have good luck. Not like fried chicken when you're not looking for it, but things like long life and good health and passing 6 weeks tests. These are real valuable to somebody. Now, I'm going to put 'em in my trunk." Before Jem went to his room, he looked for a long time at the Radley place. He seemed to be thinking again. 2 days later, Dill arrived in a blaze of glory. He'd ridden the train by himself from Meridian to Maycomb Junction. a courtesy title. Maycomb Junction was in Abbott County, where he had been met by Miss Rachel in Maycomb's one taxi. He'd eaten dinner in a diner, and he'd seen two twins hitched together get off the train in Bay St. Louis and stuck to his story regardless of threats. He had discarded the abominable blue shorts that were buttoned to his shirts, and he wore real short pants with a belt. He was somewhat heavier, but no taller, and he said he'd seen his father. Dill's father was taller than ours, and he had a black beard, pointed, and he was president of the L&N Railroad. "I helped engineer for a while," said Dill, yawning. "In a pig's ear you did, Dill. Hush," said Jim. "What do we play today?" "Tom and Sam and Dick," said Dill. "Let's go in the front yard." Dill wanted the Rover boys because they were three respectable parts. He was clearly tired of being a character man. "I'm tired of those," I said. I was tired of playing Tom Rover, who suddenly lost his memory in the middle of a picture show and was out of the script until the end, when he was found in Alaska. "Make us up one, Jim," I said. "I'm tired of making 'em up." Our first days of freedom, and we were tired. I wondered what the summer would bring. We strolled through the front yard, where Dill stood looking down the street at the dreary face of the Radley place. "I smell death," he said. "I do, I mean it," he said when I told him to shut up. "You mean when somebody's dying, you can smell it?" "No, I mean I can smell somebody and tell if they're gonna die. An old lady taught me how." Dill leaned over and sniffed me. "Jean Louise Finch, you are gonna die in 3 days. Dill, if you don't hush, I'll knock you bow-legged. I mean it now." "Y'all hush," growled Jim. "You act like you believe in hot steams." "Well, you act like you don't," I said. "What's a hot steam?" asked Dill. "Haven't you ever walked along a lonesome road at night and passed by a hot place?" Jim asked Dill. "A hot steam's somebody who can't go to heaven, just waddles around on lonesome roads, and if you walk through 'em, when you die, you'll be one too, and you'll go around at night sucking people's breath." "How can you keep from passing through one?" "You can't," said Jim. "Sometimes they stretch all the way across the road. But if you have to go through one, you say, 'Angel bright, life and death, get off the road, don't suck my breath.' That keeps them from wrapping around you." "Don't you believe a word he says, Dill," I said. "Calpurnia says that's dumb talk." Jim scowled darkly at me, and he said, "Well, are we going to play something or not?" "Let's roll in the tire," I suggested. Jim sighed. "You know I'm too big." "But you can push." I ran to the backyard and pulled an old car tire from under the house. I slapped it up on the front yard. "I'm first," I said. Dill said he ought to be first. He just got here. Jim arbitrated, awarded me first push with an extra time for Dill, and I folded myself inside the tire. Until it happened, I didn't realize that Jim was offended by my contradicting him on hot springs, and that he was patiently awaiting an opportunity to reward me. He did, by pushing the tire down the sidewalk with all the force of his body. Ground sky high melted into a mad pallet, my ears throbbing. I was suffocating. I could not put my hands to stop. They were wedged between my chest and knees. I could only hope that Jim could outrun the tire and me, or that I'd be stopped by a bump on the sidewalk. I heard him behind me, chasing and shouting. The tire bumped on the gravel, skidded across the road, crashed into a barrier, and popped me out like a cork onto the pavement. Dizzy and nauseated, I lay on the cement, and I shook my head still, pounding my ears to silence. And then I heard Jim's voice. "Scout, get away from there! Come on!" I raised my head, and I stared at the Radley steps in front of me. I froze. "Come on, Scott! Don't just lie there!" Jim was screaming. "Get up, can't you?" I got to my feet, trembling as I thawed. "Get the tire," Jim hollered. "Bring it with you. Ain't you got any sense at all?" When I was able to navigate, I ran back to them as fast as my shaking legs would carry me. "Why didn't you bring it?" Jim yelled. "Why don't you get it?" I screamed. Jim was silent. "Go on. It ain't far inside the gate. Why, you even touched the house once, remember?" Jim looked at me furiously, could not decline, ran down the sidewalk, treaded water at the gate, and then dashed in and retrieved the tire. "See there?" Jim was scowling triumphantly. "Nothing to it. I swear, Scott, sometimes you act so much like a girl it's mortifying." There was more to it than he knew, but I decided not to tell him. Calpurnia appeared in the front yard and yelled, "Lemonade time! You all getting out of that hot sun before you fry alive." Lemonade in the middle of the morning was a summertime ritual. Calpurnia set a pitcher and 3 glasses on the porch and then went about her business. Being out of Jim's good graces did not worry me especially. Lemonade was to restore his good humor. Jim gulped down his second glassful and slapped his chest. "I know what we're going to play today," he announced. "Something new. Something different." "What?" asked Dill. "Boo Radley." Jim's head at times was transparent. He had thought that up to make me understand he wasn't afraid of Radley's in any way, shape, or form, to contrast his own fearless heroism with my cowardness. "Boo Radley? How?" asked Dill. Jim said, "Scout, you can be Mrs. Radley. I declare if I will, I don't think—" "'Smatter," said Dill, still scared. "He can get out at night when we're all asleep," I said. Jim hissed, "Scout, how's he gonna know what we're doing? Besides, I don't think he's still there. He died years ago and they stuffed him up the chimney." Dill said, "Jim, you and me can play, and Scout can watch, if she's scared." I was fairly sure Boo Radley was inside that house, but I couldn't prove it, and I felt it best to keep my mouth shut, or I'd be accused of believing in hot steams, phenomena I was immune to in the daytime. Jim parceled out our roles. I was Mrs. Radley, and all I had to do was come out and sweep the porch. Dill was old Mr. Radley. He walked up and down the sidewalk and coughed when Jim spoke to him. Jim, naturally, was Boo. He went under the front steps and shrieked and howled from time to time. As the summer progressed, so did our game. We polished and perfected it, added dialogue and plot until we had manufactured a small play upon which we rang changes every day. Dill was a villain's villain. He could get into any character part assigned him and appear tall if hot was part of the delivery required. He was as good as his worst performance, and his worst performance was Gothic. I reluctantly played a sort of ladies who entered the script. I never thought it was as much fun as Tarzan, and I played that summer with more than vague anxiety, despite Jim's announcement that Boo Radley was dead and nothing would get me, with him and Calpurnia there in the daytime and Atticus home at night. Jim was a born hero. It was a melancholy little drama, woven from bits and scraps of gossip and neighborhood legend. Mrs. Radley had been beautiful until she married Mr. Radley, who lost all her money. She also lost most of her teeth, her hair, and her right forefinger. Dill's contribution. Boo bit it off one night when he couldn't find any cats and squirrels to eat. She sat in the living room and cried most of the time while Boo slowly whittled away all the furniture in the house. The 3 of us were the boys who got into trouble. I was the probate judge for a change. Dill led Jim away and crammed him beneath the steps, poking him with a brush broom. Jim would reappear as needed in shapes of the sheriff, assorted townsfolk, and Miss Stephanie Crawford, who had more to say about the Radleys than anybody in Maycomb. When it was time to play Boo's big scene, Jim would sneak into the house, steal the scissors with the sewing machine from the sewing machine drawer when Calpurnia's back was turned, and then sit in the swing and cut up newspapers. Dill would walk by, cough at Jim. Jim would fake a plunge into Dill's thigh, and from where I stood, it looked real. When Mr. Nathan Radley passed us on his daily trip to town, we would stand still and silent till he was out of sight, and then wonder what he would do to us if he suspected. Our activities halted when any of the neighbors appeared, and once Miss Maudie Atkinson stared across the street at us, her hedge clippers poised in mid-air. One day we were so busily playing Chapter 25, Book 2 of One Man's Family, we did not see Atticus standing on the sidewalk looking at us, slapping a rolled magazine against his knee. The sun said 12 noon. "What are you all playing?" he asked. Nothing, said Jim. Jim's Jim envisioned Jim's evasion told me our game was a secret, so I kept quiet. What are you doing with those scissors, then? And why are you tearing up that newspaper? If that's today's, I will tan you. Nothing. Nothing what? Nothing, sir. Give me those scissors, Atticus said. They are no things to play with. Does this by any chance have anything to do with the Radleys? No, sir, Jim reddening. Hope it doesn't, he said shortly, and he went inside the house. Jim? Shut up. He's gone in the living room and he can hear us in there. Safely in the yard, Dill asked Jim if we could play any more. I don't know. Atticus didn't say we couldn't. Jim, I said, I think Atticus knows it anyway. No, he don't. If he did, he'd say he did. I was not so sure, but Jen told me that I was being a girl, and that girls always imagine things, and that's why other people hated them. So if I started behaving like one, I could just go off and find some to play with. All right. You just keep it up then, I said. You'll find out. Atticus's arrival was the second reason that I wanted to quit the game. The first reason happened the day I rolled into the Radley front yard. Through all the head shaking and quelling of nausea and Jem yelling, I'd heard another sound, so low I could not have heard it from the sidewalk. Someone inside the house was laughing. Boom! Who's inside the house? Who's watching them? So, you probably have never gotten inside of a tire and had somebody push you. I never did either. But that was a thing that they did. And Jem is mad and he pushes her so hard. She obviously bounces across the street, bounces up the sidewalk, through that front gate, right into the Radley yard. And as she got out and everything was spinning and she tried to get her ears working again, she heard someone laughing. Because she was right by that front door. Somebody laughing. And then they find things in the tree. They find the gum. Well, she finds the gum. And then they find the box with the 2 pennies. Very old pennies. 30 to 40 years old for them. Shined up. So somebody obviously cared about them. And that tree is the tree right outside the Radley house. And the box, the ring box that the pennies were in, had silver on it. They call it tin foil, but it was the gum wrappers. Like somebody had made a design with the gum wrappers and wrapped it up. It makes you wonder. We're very obsessed with Boo Radley. Could this whole book be about him? I wonder. Well, we are in the thick of the exposition. Well, not really in the thick. We're at the beginning of it. Meeting new people and new characters. There's Dill, of course, Scout, and her brother Jem. Atticus is their dad. He's a lawyer. Calpurnia is their housekeeper. And she doesn't live there, but she does work there. Miss Caroline is at school. We met Burris Yule of the Yule family who live out by the dump. And we heard about Cecil Jacobs, who so much from school he could walk down the block. If he walked down the block straight, he would pass the Radley house and Mrs. Du Bois, who is the meanest old lady ever. But he avoids that and walks a full mile to all the way around to not be around. It's probably half a mile to hit there and half a mile to school. Let's see, who else? Little Chucky Little. We met him. I'm not sure if we really met anybody else yet. That's important. We know that we're in Maycomb County. We know we're in Alabama. We know it's about 1930-ish. We know that the Great Depression is happening. And we know that this is the life that we are kind of getting involved in. and delving into. So make sure that you take the quizzes, and I will be back. I want to read live on Thursday in conferences. And so if you look over here, along the left of the home page, you'll see somewhere that says conferences. And I will have something set up. And it is at 10 o'clock, I believe. Wait, let me check. Yes, 10 o'clock a.m., not p.m. It's too late for me, p.m. And I'm going to read chapter 5. I'll read it out loud. And hopefully some of you will be here, and you can ask questions, and I can ask questions, and you can answer, and you can turn on your camera so I could see your adorable faces, and all of that kind of stuff. So I will put in reminders about that tomorrow and Thursday morning, and that's when I'll see you next. Actually, I shouldn't say tomorrow. I'm recording this Tuesday, and I'm going to put this in Wednesday. So I guess I should say today. I don't know. I don't know how all of this works. Anyway, make sure you're doing your work. And I'll see you Thursday. Bye.